I'm Amy Jacobsen, and I'm here with my colleagues, Dr. Ashley Smith, Dr. Heather Smith, and Lindsey Murray. We are four psychologists in the Kansas City area specializing in anxiety conditions and OCD. Today, we're going to talk about social connections and relationships and some of the challenges that we're hearing from our patients when it comes to this topic.
When I think about this one, I think we need to talk about sort of two sides of the spectrum, dealing with the loneliness that's come from the social distancing and the being cut off, as well as the other side, which is not enough alone time or too much family time. And both pose different challenges. And I don't think it's one or the other. I think you can experience both. So if you guys want to start maybe with loneliness and talk about that one.
Sure.
Yes, I mean, we are social beings. It's what we long for. Even for those of us like myself who's a little more introverted, it's still so nice to have that time to connect with other people. And so it's a hard time when we don't get the chance to interact with and connect with the people as we usually would.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that so much. We know that quality relationships is one of the biggest predictors of life satisfaction and well-being and happiness, and that's been impacted right now. And when I think about connection, for me, I think about there are the really deep connections that I have with my my close people. And that may or may not be affected during this time, or it might be affected in different ways. But one of the pieces I think that was sort of surprising is that we're missing out on a lot of these like superficial little connection drops that you get from, say, chatting with somebody at the grocery store or at a restaurant or passing on the street. And I think a lot of those are gone. And maybe at work, it's the hey, how's it going conversation in the elevator. And I think a lot of us are noticing that those little seemingly meaningless interactions really do kind of fill up our connection bucket. And that's something that's just been missing lately.
People in my practice where, they might be introverts, they might have made, very deliberate choice to live alone and are typically okay with that. But they do have those little connections at the grocery store and at work. And then now they find themselves, not physically, not seeing anyone for long periods of time. And it's starting to impact them. And I think, for a lot of people, feeling lonely is a significant struggle during this time.
Well, and loneliness in general, it's really detrimental to not just our psychological health and well-being, but actually to our physical health as well. So loneliness is something, I mean, and honestly, even before the pandemic, loneliness is an issue, especially in our country. The average American adult has one fewer close friend than they did a generation ago. And there's a lot of reasons, possible explanations why. But if you are already experiencing some loneliness and then we've cut out some of these, the passing connections, or made it harder to see like I'm someone, my family lives in a different state. So we're pretty used to connecting through phone or text, and we're adding Zoom to the mix. That's new. But sometimes we're able to find ways to maintain those connections. But if you're someone whose family lives in the same town and you're used to seeing them, and all of a sudden you're not able to, that's a noticeable difference.
I'd also like to highlight those with social anxiety sometimes are having, some increased difficulty with, everyone out there saying, we'll Zoom, do virtual game nights, call people. And I have teenagers and adults that are crippled by anxiety of the idea of being on a televideo platform, or, people that typically see their friends at school and get that social connection that way. If no one's reaching out to them, it's really hard for them to be the one that initiates that contact. And so in those cases, I'm encouraging people to use a lot of creativity for social connection. And if Zoom isn't working for you, maybe dropping off a small care package for your neighbor is helpful, or smiling and waving to people on your walks. And maybe you could do a quick 10-minute Zoom call and kind of do some gradual exposure to get used to what Zoom is like. But I think people with social anxiety are, struggling with this even more sometimes because they're not used to communicating and connecting virtually.
I think another challenge is that when we're doing, FaceTimes or Zoom calls, so much of our conversation might be centered around, oh my gosh, what's going on? And there's, all of this stress and talk about coronavirus, when these are our intention is to connect and sort of feel our joy in those conversations, but it circles back to the things that are actually causing a lot of stress, anxiety, and low mood for us. So I think we do have to your point, Heather, get creative about how we use these apps and maybe trying to do finding a way to play games or using the house party app so that we are connecting on things that are totally separate from the coronavirus conversations.
That's such a good point, Lindsay, because a lot of it does kind of come back to that, and I'm not sure that always feels really helpful. I like that. And I've had several, especially teens that I work with, say the virtual just doesn't feel the same. So they're doing it. And I've had adults too say, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I'm having Zooms every weekend, and it just doesn't feel the same. And if that's the case, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a good proxy for some people, and it's not for others. I've heard, a reemergence of old school letter writing. That's great. It takes longer too, so it'll fill some time. In my neighborhood, there's a lot of sidewalk chalk art that's things like, hey, I saw one today that was like, hey, you're beautiful, and have a nice day. And those are, I have no idea who did that, but it helped me feel connected. So those kinds of things, it's back to the creativity and finding ways to counteract that loneliness through connection.
Mm-hmm. We have those in our neighborhood too, and it does brighten my day every time I go out and see those messages written on the sidewalk or see the pictures that people are making on their driveways. So even though there may not be direct dialogue, you do get that sense of connection. And maybe for those with social anxiety who or don't really feel like they have that opportunity to connect, that's a way to still connect with others and to brighten somebody else's day.
Absolutely.
I think we are finding some fun and creative ways, to try to connect with other people like that. I think it's a wonderful skill for kids to learn, or at least experience for them to have, to write a letter and then to actually put it into the mail and send a letter to their grandparent or to, somebody they wouldn't, typically get to see, or who may not be able to do the video calls because of different factors.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So let's talk about the other end of the spectrum, because I'm also hearing from a lot of families who are not used to spending this much quality time together and are actually really struggling with it. So I want to start by just saying, if that's you, it's you and everybody else out there. So that is a-okay. And it poses different challenges of how do you navigate those the too much time and the factors that can go into that, which is everybody's stressed, everybody's out of routine, everybody's human. So you're going to have those ups and downs, and then you're in this little pressure cooker. So what advice have you guys been given?
Well, I do think that we need to find the things we can be grateful for and the silver linings. Speaking with a mom yesterday who, has 2 teenagers at home. She's like, these teenagers are going to be leaving me soon. This is time I would never have had with them. There's no replication for this. So I'm going to try to see, the benefits of that. So even on those hard days, I think if we can sort of search and find the good and find the things that we can be grateful for, that helps. But back to creativity, we also have to be creative in how we find our time away. Today I took a drive for, an hour to drop something off at a family member's house that lives really far away. Normally I wouldn't make that drive, but that was sort of my vacation. I listened to an audiobook on my drive, and it was really enjoyable. Now, that's not something I would typically describe as an enjoyable activity, but for now, that's kind of how I got that out, that time away, and how I sort of fueled my me time when I'm in a house with, a family that you really can't escape from. There's nowhere to go. Those outlets that we normally have just aren't there. So we have to sort of create them in our lives right now.
I find myself pulling out research from the Gottmans, who are couples therapists and world renowned and really great, but it's just a simple framework of the idea of turning toward, turning away, and turning against bids for connection. So whether it's your partner or whether it's your child, if they're doing something, it's not necessarily, let me try that one again. So like my partner the other day says, hey, look, he just planted some seedlings. He has given me an update every day. So this is like the 6th day in a row. But rather than saying I'm busy or, oh my gosh, you've already told me 6 times, I got up and I went upstairs and I looked at them and I said, oh, wow, they are growing. And from my perspective, it's okay. We're in a potential pressure cooker. We can either use this time to feed our relationship or to damage it. And when you turn toward a bid for connection, that's how I took it. He's saying, here, look, here's something, connect with me. So I went toward it. That's like a plus sign in your relationship bank. And if you turn away from it, so that's kind of ignoring it, that's a minus. Or if you turn against, which is actually more confrontational and more active damage style, that's a really big minus. And so I find myself talking to people about that stuff when I'm not normally doing couples therapy. We're not even talking about it in that context, just in relationships, and how do we continue to foster them instead of damage them. And so that's my 2 cents, is make sure that you're taking the little moments to do the pluses, to connect, to be kind, and to validate. So when your family member is having a rough time, when those kids are surly, when that partner is not showing up in the way you'd like him or her to also think about, okay, what's going on with them, right? Most people aren't out to be intentionally mean or intentionally cruel. So if we can assume positive intent, if we can come at it and say, what is the kindest explanation for what it is they're doing? I like to put it as, assume everybody's doing the best they can with what they've got. That day, your family member may not have a whole lot to give, and it's coming out really surly. So if you can, I think for me, having that mindset of, they're doing the best they can, what's the kindest explanation, helps me not react and kind of spiral things downward.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful and very much related to that. In my role as a mom, sometimes I've been getting impatient when my daughter is just so, insistent in spending time with me, because I'm feeling like, gosh, I'm spending so much time with you. But in her mind, she's seeing me maybe on my phone or going to, do some more work, when if I really pause and think about where she's coming from, she wants some quality time with me. And so if I can slow things down or give her a time that's really dedicated to her, it doesn't have to be long, it can be short, then that will kind of fill her up better, and then allow me to be more productive when I'm taking that time to do other activities, and also let her know that we'll have a chance to do that quality time together at another time. So it is really great to consider what is this person experiencing, kind of what do they need, and how can we turn toward them and support each other during this period of time.
I love that. And then you're also getting at, one, give her quality, not quantity, right? Show up and be present with her. But also, I think really important to know, we all know when it comes to attention, there's not enough for kids.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to carve out that alone time, like Lindsey was talking about. And that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad mom or dad. That doesn't mean that you're not being attentive. That doesn't mean you're turning away. And that framework I was talking about means you're kind of setting a boundary, and you're going to handle the 19,000 other things that you have to do. And that's okay.
Yes. She actually helped me even make a sign for my door that lets her know, like, this is not a time when you can knock on the door, come in. And it just has given us a very helpful, clear boundary so that we can try to be on the same page more.
Along those lines, I really like the idea of resetting. So if we've had a morning that's been really challenging, and I'm impatient, or I'm frustrated, or I'm trying to be in the moment with my kids, but I've got 50 things on my mind, then we'll all kind of reset and say, okay, I'll have my son go back up to his room and I'll go into my room, and then we all pretend we've just woken up again and we're giving ourselves the chance to restart the day. And it's been really effective because I don't want to feel that way. He doesn't want to feel that way. None of us do, but it's hard sometimes to change that when we've already gotten on that track. So figure out what works for you to give yourself that reset so that you can make changes to those interactions so that they can feel more positive, so that you are in a place to notice those moments of gratitude when you haven't been feeling them organically throughout the day.
I love that. And I think, the strategy of validation in our relationships right now just cannot be overused. So, I think Amy mentioned briefly, in my house with the younger kids, we have had complete meltdowns over things that normally we wouldn't, and a lot of, I'm so bored, and I'm like, here's 20 activities I've suggested, but instead of suggesting the activities, I found that, like, if I just stop for a second and bring her into my lap and say, I know, I can tell you're bored and we're doing the same thing every day and you don't get to go to school. Tell me about how bored you are, and just let her kind of express that. Then at the end, I say, you want to help me make lunch? And she's like, sure, right? And I think I'm finding that even with some of the families I work with, even kids or young adults as old as kind of college freshmen are coming back and kind of pushing back against their parents, like suggesting chores and things like that. And if you take a minute to think, this was their first year of being more independent, and they got boyfriends and friends and were doing things their own way. And then they were kind of yanked out of that world and are back in, mom telling me what I need to do each day, chores wise, give them that validation first, and then kind of, make that bid for, like, I still think us as a family right now, we really all need to help each other out. So how can you help us? And they're much more receptive to that. So I think realizing that, everybody's experiencing different things, and really asking people how they're doing and validating our family members, and then kind of doing the joint problem solving of how are we as a family gonna, carve out special time or alone time, or how are we going to split responsibilities for childcare, or how are we going to divide up the chores. I think it's really important to kind of piggyback on you, Ashley, that we need to tend to these relationships right now, and that kind of needs to be a priority. And when we do that, the rest seems to be a little more successful and a little less chaotic.